Well, greetings once again. I started a few weeks ago with part one of my testimony, and I personally enjoy testimonies very much. And for the very reason is because the world needs to know that we serve a living God who is real. And so I have a hard time sharing when it comes to personal things because it's too easy really to lift yourself up and pride wants to enter in. And so I want to thank Sister Eva for the prayer to help me, to bless me, and I believe God will answer that prayer. And um, I guess for me, I consented to do this, even though I do have a hard time with this, because I want to praise God and I want to publicly thank Him, number one, and also um, I pray that this would be an encouragement to others. And we should learn to praise God because in doing so, it will strengthen our faith. It will recall the things that He has done for us because there's coming a time when we are going to need our faith and we're going to have to remember that God indeed loves me and He's given me plenty of evidence for it. And so I want to share some experiences in my life. I thank God for them. And I want to read a couple verses to you. One is in Psalms chapter 21 and verse 2. It says, "Thou hast given him his heart's desire and hast not withholden the request of his lips." And you know, so many times I've cried out to God and He has answered my heart's desire. And so I want to share these things with you because in Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 15, it says, "By him, therefore, let us offer the sacrifice of praise to God continually. That is, the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to His name." And so, by sharing my testimony, I want to give thanks to His name. And so, I wrote down a few things of the many things that He's done for me that I thought would be of um, I think most significance, I guess, perhaps not. I don't know, but I'll try to get through as many as I can. Some are short and brief, some are a little longer, but I want to keep it to 45, 50 minutes, so we'll see what I can fit in. But I want to do this chronologically as well. Now, I shared with you some things of my experience when I was working for Ecolab, and so I'm going to start with that time period. And that's when I started coming into the Christian faith. And so that's when I saw the workings of God. And I know that all of these things that He did for me were to strengthen my faith and to encourage me. And so I've learned through these things that I need to be an encouragement to others as well. And so the first story I want to share with you, I'll give you a little background, which I had shared a little earlier in part one. But when I was working for Ecolab, I'd put in long hours, and I was a bachelor at the time, just gone through a divorce. I had my daughter custody half time, and I was leading out in prayer meeting. I would help with Sabbath school, and I was a deacon at the church. And I shared with you in part one that I was even willing to take a demotion with Ecolab, or not a demotion as far as rank, but as far as pay, because I thought it would allow me more time um, for me to enter into the things that I believe God was calling to me to do, which I had Bible studies as well. And so time was of the essence. I felt God calling me, and I wanted to give Him as much time as I could, and yet I had to earn a living as well. And so keeping that in mind, I'm going to move forward with this experience. I had over 200 customers that I had to deal with each month, and I would get phone calls from them, and it was difficult for me to get the things I needed to get done because we couldn't talk on the phone while we were in vehicles. So I couldn't do it in between stops. I had to take the time to call my customers back. And it really was stressing me. And I thought, Lord, what can I do to minimize this? Well, um, he brought to my mind, or I saw it or heard from somebody, I'm not sure, but a Bluetooth. We all know what a Bluetooth is. And I thought, well, that would be a great idea because then I could have this Bluetooth in my ear. I could talk to my customers and I could keep on working. I thought, wow, this is great. And so I was so excited. And I went and got one that was good. It was $100, somewhere's in there. But it worked great. And I was so happy to have it. And I had it for about a month. And I went out to a customer out in a country club. It was a golf course, and I was servicing the facility. And I got back into my truck, and I had some messages that I had to answer. And so I was going to flip open, excuse me, my Bluetooth, and it was gone. I thought, oh no. So I searched the truck, and I'm trying to think, well, I had it just before I got out to service my customer, so it must be somewhere out here. And I thought, oh Lord, how am I going to find this? And my heart just sank because you have no idea how busy my life was until we walk in somebody's shoes. And again, I don't want to make this about me, but so you can understand. Yeah, I was dreaded. I walked outside and I looked up into the sky and I started crying and I said, Lord, you know how much this Bluetooth means to me, how much it saved time for me. And I'm doing this because I want to serve you in a better capacity. I said, I don't even know where to begin to look for this Bluetooth out in this countryside here. Where? I don't know. And so I just started hanging my head kind of almost in overwhelming fashion. And as I looked down, here right between my feet was the Bluetooth. And so, in an answer to Psalm 21:2, when we cry out, God hears these things. And even when we don't cry out, I remember another occasion working with Ecolab. We had a service contract for the Verizon towers. Some were in town, but most of them were out of town in remote areas out in the countryside. And I had lost a tool somewhere. I didn't know where, no idea when, but it was a specialized tool that I used only during the summer months. Well, I'd went through that winter contemplating, okay, I got to get another one. Well, we were getting to the end of spring, the snow was thawing, and it was getting to the point where I needed to make a decision to purchase this tool. Well, I went out to this Verizon tower in the middle of nowhere, went to the back of my truck to um, get the equipment that I needed. And right there where I parked, right at my feet, was this tool that I had lost. I had no idea that I lost it there. But my point with this is when we cry out, or even when we don't cry out to God, He hears our prayers. He knows the desires of our hearts. He understands the frame and the frailty of the human mind and the body. And so God is so merciful and kind, even in such little ways. Um, and so after I was working for Ecolab for a time, I had met my wife, and um, she and I were courting, and she said that yes, I can come up to North Dakota for a time, but I would like to go back to Kentucky. And I said, well, my daughter's still in school. I would like to be here for that. And so we decided to stay here until she had graduated. Well, she had told me under one condition that she would move up, that we live out in the country. Well, now I had been making changes in my Christian experience. I had been learning the gospel and I had been learning about health and making dietary changes and all these different things. But when she said she wanted to move out to the country, I thought, huh, that had never crossed my mind. And I was curious. I thought, okay, I like the country. That's fine with me. And so I was looking for a place in the country for her and myself. And I had just been driving around the countryside, just stopping in at farms and asking them if they knew of vacant properties or something for sale in the country. And I was having no luck. And at the beginning of my search, I was getting this number on my phone. I didn't know who it was. Like I said, I have many customers, and I could be taking phone calls all day, but this phone number came up and I decided not to answer it, and they didn't leave a message, and I thought, well, it must have been too important. And I continued my search, and I continued getting this phone call from this same number. And I thought, well, I don't know who it is. I like to, I guess, forgive me, but screen my calls to some degree unless I know who it is. But they would never leave a message. And they would call back for a month and a half. This went on. And so I thought, well, okay, I'm going to answer this because I want to know who this is who keeps calling me. And so I called the number and I said, yes, I keep getting this number on my phone um, from from you, and I've not taken the call. I said, what is it that you need? And he said, well, you're looking for a place in the country, and so I'm just getting back to you to let you know I have a place available. And I said, well, who are you? I'd never talked to anybody. I have no idea how he got my number. I've never talked to the man, but he insisted that I talk to him. And I said, well, okay. And I told him it must have been somebody else. He said, no, this is the number I got. I talked to you. So I said, okay. So I went out to look at his property, and it was beautiful. And so God answered the calls of my wife's desires. I didn't know anything about country living. I didn't even know there was a call to do so. And so there are many experiences that took place on this country property, but I share this one too because it was the beginning of learning the call of country living. While we were living on that country property, I felled my first tree. That was an experience for me. It was um, kind of nervous, but I accomplished it. Planted really my first garden, and we had a beautiful garden. When people would come out to visit us, they would always comment on how beautiful the garden was, and it really was. The soil in North Dakota is tremendous, at least where we were, and for the most part, the state is. And I learned many things on that first property. So this was the beginning of my country living experience. And so I thank God for that. He gave me a taste of it and even a desire. I learned some carpentry skills while we were there too. We set up a modular home there, and a good friend of ours, he came out and he showed me how to build a deck. And so I learned some carpentry skills there. Um, but in all of these things, God hears the desires of our hearts, and this was one that, again, my wife was crying out for it, and for me, again, I didn't know anything about it, but God knew I needed this. And so, as I was working there at Ecolab yet, I shared with you how I took this new position, and it was supposed to allow me more time. Well, with this new position, I ended up traveling more. And I ended up going to this route that I had not been on before. It was within our district, though. The man who ran it had hip surgery, so I had to fill in with him for a time. And so I was learning the route, and I went to this small town in east central North Dakota. I won't name the town or the people's names just for their privacy. But I stopped at this grain elevator, and those of you who don't know what a grain elevator is, it's a place that farmers can take their crops to sell them or to store them. The elevator can store them for the price. If it gets better, then they can sell them at that time. And so I go walking into this grain elevator. I walk into the office, and I wanted to sign in and meet the management and just familiarize myself with them and to let them know I was there to do my services. And as I walk in this doorway, and um, there was two men sitting in front as I was walking in, and they were staring in this direction, kind of behind me, off to my left a little bit, and they were just sitting there. They looked dumbfounded. And I thought, well, that's strange. So I stopped and I was looking at them a little bit, and then I saw movement to the left of me. And so I looked over to the left, and I see this man leaning up against this wall with his arms crossed. And he's sitting there looking over to the left of me again. And so I look over to see what they're looking at. Here's a man sitting on a chair. He's got long hair and he's got a long goatee, and he's standing there playing the air guitar, and he's tapping his foot to the rhythm of music. And so I'm looking at him and I thought, wow, this is really bizarre. I don't know what's going on here. So I just stood and nobody was saying anything. I felt kind of uncomfortable. And the man that was standing there against the wall, leaning back against the wall with his arms crossed, he looked at me, he said, "What do you think?" And I thought, what do I think about what? I don't know what's going on here. He said, about what he's saying. I said, I don't know. What is he saying? He's trying to tell us that the devil uses music and the syncopation to hypnotize people, and he can enter into their minds through the music. And I was shocked. I thought, wow. And I said to him, well, I agree with him. And the man that was sitting down in the chair, he looked up at me, said, you do? I said, yeah, I do. He seemed dumbfounded. Well, the man that had his arms crossed, he said, okay. He said, well, what kind of music do you listen to? I said, well, I like to listen to the old hymns, the gospel hymns. That's my favorite music. He said, oh, really? He said, well, what denomination are you? I said, well, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And this man that was sitting in this chair jumped up out of his chair and he grabbed his head and he was running around the room. Oh my, oh my, oh my. And I thought, what happened? He's running around the room and he comes up and he jumps up and he puts his arms around my neck and he's hanging on to me. He said, you got to tell him, you got to tell him, you got to tell him. And he's just shaking me. And I'm looking at him and I don't know what's going on. I said, tell him what? What do I tell him? And he's just beside himself. He said, you need to tell him about the Sabbath. And I was looking at him. I said, what about it? He said, tell him about the Sabbath. Tell him about the Sabbath. You've got to tell him. And I was sitting there looking, and I looked at these other men, and the man standing against the wall, he said, tell me about it. And I said, well, I started to share with him, and I won't go through all the details, but all the details we know when the Sabbath change came in all of this. And these two men that were sitting there, they're just sitting there staring at me. This other man's listening to me, and this other man, he's just walking around the room just frantic, and he's just, I don't seem like he was out of his mind. Um, and he's just walking around, oh my, oh my. And so I share with them about the Sabbath. And so the man that's leaning against the wall, he looks at me and he said, so, he said, you mean to tell me that if I don't go to church on the Sabbath, I'm going to hell? I thought, oh Lord, I don't even know this man. I started praying. I said, Father, what do I tell this man? I don't know. And so the Lord gave me the words. I said, do you believe in the Ten Commandments? And he said, yes. I said, do you believe if you are a murderer that you will enter into the kingdom of heaven? He just looked at me. He said, good point. Good point. I said, okay. So then the next words out of his mouth to me were, what do I need to do? What must I do to be saved? And my jaw just about dropped and hit the floor, because that coming Sabbath, I was speaking in my hometown church, and the title of my message was, what must I do to be saved? And so I sat there for the next 30, 45 minutes sharing them my sermon. And these people just stared at me, dumbfounded. And I was just, my heart was pounding. I thought, Lord, you brought me here for this. You have to bless me. And so I shared with them. And when I was done, these two men that were sitting there in the chairs next to each other, they just sat there and just staring at me. And the man against the wall, he just got up when I was done and he walked away. And this other man, he grabbed me by the arm that was playing the music and he said, you got to pray for me. You need to pray for me. Come and pray with me. And he grabbed me and he took me down into the basement and he was telling me things. And I was just getting nervous and frightened. I was, Lord, you are working with this man. Help me not to get in the way. Give me the words that this man needs to hear. I don't know. Because the things that he was sharing with me, he was not a Seventh-day Adventist. Don't know what he was, but he told me that he played in a rock and roll band. But he said that God was giving him these messages, he said, but nobody wants to listen to me. And so he said, I started writing songs, and he started singing me these songs, and I started getting chills because if I didn't know better, this man was reading the spirit of prophecy. God was leading this man. There was no question in my mind. And it was the only way, he said, I can get people to listen to me. But he begged me to pray with him. And so we went in the basement and we prayed together. And so I got his address and I mailed him some literature. Unfortunately, I didn't stay in that area, so I don't know what all happened. But with him, I lost my contact information with him, but I still pray for him. But I went and did my services. And it took me about 45 minutes to do my services. And so I walked back into the office. And when I got back into the office, these two men that were sitting on these stools were sitting in the same position, just looking as dumbfounded as they did when the time I got there. And so I walked in and they just looked up at me and they said, we didn't know. We had no idea. And I didn't know what to say to them. And so I needed my paperwork signed, and I saw the office there. And when I looked in the office, the man that was leaning against the wall that was doing all the talking was the manager. So I walked into his office and I sat in front of his desk, and I needed to get my paperwork signed. And I just sat there waiting because he was shuffling papers and going back and forth. And finally he finished and he leaned back into his chair. And he said to me, so, he said, did you get him straightened out? And I looked at him, I said, it's not my job to straighten him out. And he looked at me and he leaned over his desk and he pointed right in my face. He said, if you have the truth, that is your job. I sat back in my chair and I thought, oh Lord, to be reproved, that is my work. I thought, Lord, have mercy. You're working in the hearts of other people. And to be a part of it, I was just overwhelmed that God had placed me there to speak a word in season. I don't know whatever happened to these men. I don't work there anymore. I don't have their contact information. But it so much encouraged me to know that if we are preparing and doing our work, that God can use us. And I mean, to me, what a special privilege to be used by God in something so profound as that experience. And I was just so thankful for God, that he would even consider me to be allowed to be a part of that experience. But um, anyway, that was one of the most significant experiences I had with Ecolab. And I'll share one more with Ecolab and then, or two more quickly, and then I'll move forward. Um, as I stated earlier, my time, I can't express enough how precious my time was. And I'm a very organized person. I like to be on time. And I scheduled some work that was out of town. I lived in Bismarck at that time, yeah. And it was again at a grain elevator. And the service I had to do when there could be no customers there. Now, this was in January. If you've ever been to North Dakota in January, that morning, it was 5 o'clock in the morning. It was 40 below, the wind was blowing, and it was snowing. And I had a day full scheduled, and I had prayer meeting that evening. And so I couldn't have anything go wrong. I had to get things accomplished so I could get back. I want to be settled when I go into prayer meeting. I don't want to just go running in there and let's go to it. And so I get there, 5 o'clock in the morning. There's nobody there. The business isn't open. The area I needed to get to did not require a key for me to access it. And so I get there and I pull up in the driveway of this grain elevator and I put it in park and I'm going through the list of the things that I need to get ready to go out. And I thought, oh Lord, I forgot my rubber boots. I needed rubber boots. The area I had to go into had water in it. And I thought, oh Lord, you know that the demands on my time. I said, I can't afford this. I can't come back because it's out of town and they needed this service done. And so again, I just, I broke down. I had tears in my eyes and I was crying out to God. I said, Lord, I said, please, I don't know what to do. I am a child. I have no strength within me. I need you, Father. And as clear as I'm talking to you, I heard in my head, go around the corner. There's a pair of rubber boots. And my first instinct was I put it in reverse. I believed it. And then as I'm backing up at the driveway and I'm thinking, did I just hear that correctly? There'd be a pair of rubber boots. Well, 5 o'clock in the morning, it's pitch dark. I got my headlights on. I'm driving through this around the corner of this building, and there's a small parking lot there. And my headlights, they shine out around in the middle of that parking lot. And would you believe there was a pair of rubber boots sitting in the middle of that parking lot? Now, this was out in the middle of country as well. Who would leave a pair of rubber boots there? I don't know, but God made sure that whoever it was left them there for me. And so I was so thankful. God really truly does hear us when we cry out. And I shared too an experience with Ecolab that this new position that I took because I wanted to have more time to commit to the work of God. Well, we took the medical missionary training. My employment with Ecolab ceased. And so we began full-time medical missionary work and outreach work. And for a year's time, we were doing this. Well, we didn't have any income coming in. We were new in the ministry and we weren't getting support or anything. And so it was, Lord, what are we going to do? I'm going to have to go back to work. I'll have to find employment again. And so we kept it in prayer. And I was getting this mail from Ecolab. I don't know, they didn't take me off their mail list, and I was throwing the mail away. I wasn't even looking at it, but something from Ecolab came to me. And I was going to throw it away again, but it looked like something different and unusual. So I opened it up, and I looked in there, and it said that I have to do something with my pension plan. And I thought, well, this must be a mistake. I don't have a pension plan. I've never contributed to it. I didn't even know anything about a pension plan. So I called my old district manager and I said, is this true that we had pension plans? He said, oh, yeah. He said, that's right. They don't tell us about it, but they contribute a certain percentage of our salary every year to it. Why they never mentioned that to me, I don't know. But anyway, it was just another way of God confirming that this is the work that I want you to do. Here is a little gift to keep you going. But anyway, money is not everything, but along the way, God has rewarded us, to keep us going in our ministry work in so many different ways. But I remember one time too, again, when we were in difficult times and we didn't know how we were going to get by, but just another example, and then I'll move past the financial thing because the reality of it is we need money to live. Dana was going through her computer bag, um, looking for something for her computer, and she stuck her hand in one of the side compartments, and she pulled out a stack of money. It was $3,000. And the only thing we can figure is we were doing presentations somewhere and somebody came by and put it in her computer bag. We don't know. But anyway, there are other examples like that, but these are just ones that stood out for me that I wanted to share. But then I want to move along quickly because there's a couple more I want to get to. But um, we moved to Kentucky eventually, and we began ministry work there. And we lived in a Mennonite and Amish community. And it was very pleasant. The people were so simple. They were so kind. Horse and buggy. There were people that lived there too that had automobiles. But going to their stores, it was so simple. Many of them didn't have electricity and so forth. It was just such a nice atmosphere. And well, I had taken up carpentry skills, learned them. And I thought this would be one way I could do outreach too. As Paul was a tent maker, he had to earn his living, but he used tent making, I'm sure, to his advantage to reach out. And that's what I thought I could do too. It seemed that God was leaning me that way. And so while I was there, I endeavored to take up carpentry, and I was invited to work with this Mennonite man. That's what he did. And he had other men that worked with him as well. And so um, he was a bishop in the community, in the Mennonite community, a well-respected man, a very nice man as well, too. I appreciated working with him. I didn't know him that well because this experience I'm about to share with you happened early on while I was working with him. We were working on a home. We were raising it up off the foundation, raising the ceiling level of the basement, and remodeling the whole interior of the home. And we each had our duties, and I was working in one part of the home and others other things. And this vehicle pulled up, and this lady and a younger lady got out, and they had their hands full of boxes and such. And then somebody noticed them coming in, and they said, "Okay, boys, let's take a break." And so, okay, we set down our tools and whatever, and we all gathered around. Here, it was members of the Mennonite community. They owned the home we were working on, and they had brought cake and coffee for the workers. And so we had all sat down, and I was offered coffee, and I said, "No, thank you." I said, "I appreciate that, but no, thank you." And then I was offered cake as well, and I refused that too. I appreciated their offer. And so I don't know if it was 15, 20 minutes, whatever it was, but we got done and we went back to work. And a few minutes went by, and I heard this voice, and this man, this Mennonite man, who was the bishop, I won't reveal his name, he come walking up to me, and he looked me in the face, and he pointed me in the face. He said, "That is very rude. When somebody offers you good hospitality, not to take up that good hospitality. That was very rude." And he turned around and walked away. And I was dumbfounded. I thought, "Oh Lord, I've offended this man, and I wasn't sure how I offended him." And so I just went back to work, and these thoughts are running through my mind. "Lord, what did I do? What did I do? I'm not sure what I even did." And he came up to me again, and same thing. He said, "That is so rude when you refuse good hospitality." And he walked away. And so I said, "Okay, Lord, I just need to go and find out what this is about." And so I walked back to him and I said, "What is it that I've done that has offended you?" And he said, "Those ladies, they brought us things for our break and you refused." He said, "That is wrong to refuse good hospitality." And I thought, well, I need to tell him why. And so I said, "The reason why I refused," I said, "because I don't drink coffee because there's caffeine and other harmful things in coffee that I don't want to put into my body." And I said, "As far as the cake," I said, "I'm not sure, but I know how most people make cakes. There's cake that I don't partake of." And so I didn't eat of it. And then he looked at me, he said, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Well, my body is the temple of God, and I have to care for my body. And these things have harmful side effects, and so I choose not to partake of them." Well, he couldn't understand that. I guess hospitality comes before the care of the body. And I did have an experience with other Mennonite people who thought it foolish to consider the health of the body because that's being selfish. Now, I'm not condemning them, but that's just their mindset. Good people again. And so I kind of understood where he was coming from with that aspect, but I didn't know the hospitality. They're very hospitable people, wonderful people. And so I went home and I shared that experience with my wife, and I said, "I don't know what to do." And so I lifted it up in prayer. I said, "Lord, I don't want to offend these people." I said, "Please help me." And so the Lord gave me an idea of what to do. And so that next day I sat there while I was working and I kept checking out the window. I wanted to make sure and see the ladies before they came again. I wanted to meet them. And so when I saw the one lady pull up, I quickly went outside and met her outside. I didn't want to confront her in front of the other workers. And I said, "Sister," I said, "please forgive me." I said, "I just want you to know that I really appreciate your kind hospitality." I said, "But I have diet restrictions. There are certain things that I won't put into my body." And I briefly explained to her, and she looked at me and she said, "Oh, that's okay." She said, "There's things that I can't have either." And so she said, and she started sharing with me, some of the things that she understands that some things are just not healthful, and she's cut them out as well. And so I thought, well, that's so wonderful. And I went inside and I said, oh Lord, I said, thank you so much for helping her to be so understanding and working with her too to help her realize that her body is the temple. And so the next day, or I don't remember if it was the following day, I wanted to talk to the other young lady as well. Well, she came, I didn't know if it was the following day or the day after that. I quickly went outside, and the Lord worked it out where I could see her before she did come. And I met her too. And I said, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. And I explained the same thing to her. And she said, that's okay with me. She said, I just bring it, and whoever wants to eat can eat. She said, I'm okay with it. And I said, okay. I said, thank you so much for being so understanding. I really appreciate that. And so she had left. And then the next day, I went to this bishop and I said, I went and talked to the ladies and I apologized to them and I explained my standing with them and they were okay with it. And then, he said, well, he said, I appreciate that. And um, he said, Kalon, he said, um, I don't agree with you. He said, but I really appreciate a man who's going to stand for his convictions. He said, I just don't see that in the world. And he said, I just want to thank you for that. And so our relation developed into something that he would confide in me on certain issues. He would say, Kalon, what are your thoughts on this? And so when I thought of this experience, number one, it gave me the opportunity to share our health message. And secondly, it reminded me of Daniel, how Daniel was willing in spite of it. Now, he faced more than I did, but it just was kind of resonated with me how he was going to stand for what was right regardless. He wasn't going to defile his body. And when he didn't, God brought him into tender favor with the prince of the eunuchs. And that's what I saw that happened with this bishop. Because I was willing to stand, God brought me into tender favor with this man. And I greatly appreciate that. And I just want to encourage people out there. We don't need to compromise to bring ourselves into tender favor and connection with people because we don't control those emotions. God does. And when we stand for that which is right without compromising, that's when God can use the power of His Spirit to touch and reach the hearts of people. And so we must stand firm, even though, just like the prince of the eunuchs, he said, what your request is, it might endanger my head to the king. Even if those decisions may take us into that position, we can't compromise. Because King Nebuchadnezzar was an unreasonable man, and it was him that demanded something unreasonable of that prince, not God. Daniel was just simply standing for that which is right. And so I just want to encourage people to stand for what is right. Do it in love, but don't compromise. And watch the power of God work. He will take us into places and give us experiences that we need for what is coming. Because what is coming, brothers and sisters, we know that every earthly support is going to be cut off. We are going to feel as Christ felt upon that cross, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? So all of these experiences that we are willing to allow ourselves to be in will strengthen us for that time. And we will remember these experiences. And we will say, no, indeed, God has promised that He will not leave me nor forsake me. And so I have time for a couple more. And so while I was living in Kentucky, I drove a bus for a short time, about a year and a half, and I was a sub driver, so I was on different routes. And when we were in training, our supervisor had told us, now this was in this county, the county that we were in. At this time, he said that only 13% of the children in this county live with their mother and father, their biological mother and father. Only 13%. I thought, wow. He said, there are so many broken homes in this community. And I thought, Lord, okay, before I would get on that bus, I would pray. Father, I pray that if it is your will, that you could use me to encourage someone today. Now, there are other stories I could share on the bus with the children. They're so wonderful, but I want to share this one particular story. Um, and I know this to be true, what he was saying, because like I said, I was a sub, so I'd be on different routes and I would see these same children on these different routes, and it was like they didn't have a home. And I even heard boys talking behind me that, my dad's in jail, or I haven't seen my dad. And you would hear these things and it would break your heart. And um, one day, I had the children sitting in order, like the kindergartner in the front, then the first, and then so forth backwards, so I could watch them because they would have more needs. And so I had this little girl sitting behind my seat, and she said, "Hey, Mr. Bus Driver, um, I don't remember the boy's name. He says that this is my name on this plastic bag, and it's not my name, I don't think, is it?" And I said, "Well, why don't you wait until we stop and then I'll take a look at it." Well, we got to the school about 10 minutes early, so I had some time before the doors would open up. And so we're on there. I said, "Well, let me see that bag." And I looked at it, and it was a Ziploc bag, and on the bag it said Ziploc. And I said, "No," I said, "unless your name is Ziploc, that's not your name." And she said, "I told you." And I prayed. I said, "Lord, what more? I've got a conversation here. What more could I share?" Well, she had a half of an apple in her bag. And I said, "Did you know that the apple is king of the fruit?" And they said, "No." And I said, "Yeah, there's even a saying that says an apple a day helps keep the doctor away." And I said, "Because it's loaded with nutrients." And that one little girl, she looked at me, she says, "Well, my daddy says a doctor a day keeps the apple away." And I had to chuckle, and that could be true with some doctors, but anyway, they don't look to what we eat too much as health concerns. And so I said, "Did you know that an apple is a fruit?" And I don't remember their responses, but anyway, I said, "Do you know how you can tell the difference between a fruit and a vegetable?" And they said, "No." And I said, "Well, the Bible says that the fruit has the seed within itself." And so they started asking me questions. "Well, is this a fruit?" And I said, "Well, does it have a seed within itself?" And they would say yes or no. And so the conversation was going on. And I noticed as I was looking up, some of the older children or adults were coming forward and they were listening to our conversation. And they started partaking of it. And so we got to talk about um, fruits and vegetables and how nourishing they are, and how some people think that certain fruits are vegetables like tomatoes and cucumbers and so forth. Anyway, I share that little experience because it's just some way where we can enter in to think of these things of the children too. How can we enter into their simple minds to introduce biblical principles? And so as I was going home that day, I thank God so much for that experience. And I thought, Lord, the seed and the fruit, I thought you added vegetables afterwards. I said, why is that? I didn't understand that. And I just asked him, why is it different now that, we can eat vegetables? And God showed me, and I thought, just through that little experience, He rewarded me for taking the time to talk to these children. He said, because, Kalon, before sin, my seed was in you. But after sin, now you have to bring the seed into you. And I thought, wow, Lord, that is so profound. And so I thought, but there, I'll share another quick one because it had to do with a young man on a bus route that I was on, and he was really a troublemaker. He was a third grader, and the older children knew. I mean, he was the one again that didn't live with his father, so he didn't have a lot of direction and guidance, and he was a troubled boy. And the older kids took advantage of him. They knew they could ask him to do something, and he'd do it because he really was just looking for attention. And one day, one of the older students come up to me from the back of the bus and said, um, I'll just call him Brian. Brian stole this fidget from Margie. I don't know if that's the names, but he said, and she's crying back there. And I said, okay, I don't know what a fidget is, number one. And so he went and sat down, and I called Brian up and I said, Brian, I said, did you take Margie's fidget? And I said, first of all, what is a fidget? And he tried explaining it to me. I guess it's something you hold between your fingers and you spin it. I occupy your time. I'm not sure what the point of it, but I said, Brian, and he said, no, I didn't. I didn't take it. And so he went and sat down, and I said, Lord, I don't think this older student would lie to me. So I called Margie up, and she was crying, and she said, indeed, he stole it from her. So I had her sit down, and I called Brian back up again, and I said, Brian, you know, I want to respect you as a young man. I'm going to give you the opportunity to be honest with me, whether you took that or not. And I tried to encourage him that, you know, young men make decisions that will determine where they will go in life, you know, and how people in our community and God respect those who are honest and true, because there is value in being honest. And so, Brian, I will give you that opportunity. But if I find out that you lied to me, you know, there will be consequences. And so I'm just going to leave that decision up to you. You can go back and sit down. Well, a couple of minutes later, he come up to me and he handed me the fidget. He said, I did take it. He said, I'm sorry. And I put my arm around him and I hugged him. I said, Brian, I said, you have no idea how rare it is to see honesty in people today. I said, I want to thank you so much for being honest. And I said, you know, I said, if you want, I really could use some help. He was at the end of my bus route. I said, if you could close the windows up for me. He said, sure, I'll do that. And so those words, I had no idea where they would go. But the next day, I went to pick up the children again at the school, and they line up in rows for the certain buses and certain times. And when I went there, I saw my row lining up, and I saw him pushing and shoving all the other kids, and he's getting his way to the front. And I thought, oh, Lord, it sure didn't last long. But I was so disappointed. And so I opened the doors when they said they could load up, and he come running in. He come running up to me. He said, can I sit up front right behind you? He said, what do you need help with? And I was shocked because I wasn't expecting that. And I said, well, you can sit right behind me. That's fine. And I had other boys that I had been working with on this bus route that we had been entering into conversations about books, you know. And I said, well, one of the best books, they were saying Harry Potter and so forth. And I said, well, the best book I've ever read. And they asked me, and I said, it was the Bible. And they said, you read the Bible? I said, yes. And we started talking about stories in the Bible and how could they be true, and they were sharing me their understanding of what certain things in the Bible meant, and it was kind of comical. And so we got to talk about those things, and I got to share them, and we had very nice conversations. They were nice young boys. And anyway, he started sitting up front with these other young boys. And the other older students in the back, they always like to work Brian up. And so they were yelling his name, and the two other boys that I had previous conversations with, one of them, he turned around and said, you leave Brian alone. He's a changed man. And so that just thrilled my heart. I just, these young people just need encouragement. They need people to take time to acknowledge that they're important and to see the changes that God did in this young man and these other young boys. It was such encouragement. And so anyway, if you ever get the opportunity, don't walk by a young person and just think that they're just troublemakers. Ask God for wisdom how to help them. We have no idea what's going on in their minds or their hearts, but God does. God does. And so I thank God for that experience and that wonderful privilege and opportunity. And I just pray God's blessings still be upon those young boys, that they would continue to be godly men and continue to be honest. And my time is running short here, and I want to share one more story in closing of an experience that took place about a year and a half ago. My wife and I, we had sold the farm that we had first purchased and the home that we had built and where we were having the camp meetings because it was just her and I, and it was too much. We had no help. And so we had prayed for certain things to make sure that this was God's leading. First of all, that He wanted us to sell this place. We were off grid. There were no comparable homes to it, so you couldn't get a loan for it. Whoever had it had to have cash. And we asked above market value because we wanted to know for certain if this was God leading that we should sell this property. Well, it wasn't but 3 days, and we had the offer, and we said we want to get the amount we're asking for, and we were offered the amount we were asking for. The man had cash, and so we thought, okay, this must be it. Well, we didn't have a home, and so we saw a piece of property for sale because we wanted to have a country home. We know that that was our counsel, and it was 120 or 30 acres. And it was a very reasonable price, and we had looked at it, and it was a beautiful piece of property, and it had fairly good timber. Now, I'm a boy from North Dakota, so I wouldn't know what timber, if it was good or not. But anyway, Dana thought, because she grew up in the woods, she thought it was a good investment for the price. And so we thought, well, there's no home there. We would have to invest everything we have. We'd have to borrow a little money to be able to purchase this property. Because we plan to turn around and sell it because of the timber value, invest it back into the ministry and a property for us. Well, I'm going to make this a short story because it is a long story. We found out that after we had purchased it, it was not 120 acres. I say 120 or 130 because the PVA says 130. The man who sold it says 120. The deed that he gave us, I don't know how to read a deed, so anybody who's looking to live out in the country, be wise, do your homework, do your research. Don't buy a piece of property without a survey. We bought it with a deed, and I don't know how to read a deed. But anyway, it turned out that it was only 74.08 acres because we had it surveyed, because there seemed to be confusion with the property. When we put the timber up for sale, the I don't know, arborist or whoever he was, came out for the timber companies, and he does a walkthrough with the deed to make sure that the property, that the timber was for sale indeed was on that property. Well, he said it's not. And so that shocked us, and so it scared everybody away. And so we had it surveyed, and indeed it was only 74.08 acres. And so we ended up losing 48 acres. And this was distraughtful for me because we invested everything and borrowed money. And we put more money into it, hiring an attorney to research this. And indeed, we did not have the paperwork for that other parcel of property that was supposed to go with this 75 acres. And so we fought this for a year, hired attorneys and surveyors to have it all surveyed, and ended up spending another $15,000 that we had to borrow money again to survey it and to have it researched. And indeed, there was no paperwork, but all the evidence showed that we did own it. The Corps of Engineers said that, yes, we bought it from you. They have the paperwork for it. The neighbors said, yes, you own it. Everybody knows that this property belonged to these people. But what happened when the Corps of Engineers went in to put their boundaries up along the river, because it was along the Cumberland River. The Corps of Engineers buys 25 feet along the shoreline. It's there. So when they went in to buy it, they had to redo the deed on that parcel. Well, apparently it was never redone, or it was done and it didn't get filed or something. So that was the deed that was missing. And so this bothered me for a year. And I was not representing God correctly. I should have trusted him from the beginning, but it just overwhelmed me. We had nothing. We had no place to stay. Um, I was trying to make ends meet, working again in ministry work. And after a year of battling this, I just finally said, Lord, okay, I know he was trying to show me that I had work to be done in my heart yet that was not done. And so I just turned it over to him. I said, Lord, I'm done. I'm not I'm not going to be upset with you. I'm sorry that I ever even was. Please forgive me. I'm very sorry. And I thanked him for this experience. I didn't know why, but I thanked him. It just looked like, okay, we're going to have this piece of property. But I started trusting God. I knew that he was going to do something because he doesn't leave us this way. If he's called us to the country, he'll take care of it. And so I began to trust in him, knowing that he was going to do something. Well, another year went by. This is when the housing market started skyrocketing. And we had these people from Atlanta area contact us and say they were interested in the piece of property, and they wanted to see it. So we showed it to them and we explained everything to them of what took place. We didn't want anything hidden. Well, it scared them a little bit, but we were so thorough with it. And even the land values they were going up, the price that we were asking um, was still a fair price, even at 74 acres. And so we had opportunity to get to know these folks. We went out to eat with them. First of all, take that back. We invited them to eat with us because we don't go out to the restaurants and eat. And so we told them we would prepare a meal for them. When we explained to them how we ate, invited them to they could bring salad and so forth. Well, we ate with them, and it didn't seem like they enjoyed the meal very well. And we thought, oh, okay. So they wanted to meet together again. They were interested in the property and wanted to know more about us. And so we met. They're super wonderful people. And so this time, Dan and I prayed. We thought, they didn't seem too interested in our food. I said, I don't want to press it. Can we find a place where we can find a vegan meal and let's eat at a restaurant someplace? And so we decided to do that. And so we ate at this pizza place. They had vegan uh, crust and looked like a pretty good option. And so we ate there, we visited with them, and we got done. And we walked out of there and we were visiting in the parking lot. And they were heading back to the Atlanta area. And I said to the man, his name was Thomas, I'll share that. I said, Thomas, I said, please forgive me. And he said, for what? And I said, we don't eat at restaurants. I wanted him to know. I said, but we thought that you were offended by our food. And he said, no. He said it was different. It was good, but it was different, for our taste buds, but we appreciated it. And he said, well, why do you apologize? And I said, because it wasn't because of the food. It was while we were in there, they had televisions going everywhere and the music. It was horrible. And I said the music was, I said, I don't appreciate that. And so please forgive me. And he looked at me and he said, Kalon, he said, don't compromise. He said, if that's your belief, he said, you can't compromise. And it just confirmed me, God was telling me through this man, don't compromise, Kalon, to please the world. I wanted to accommodate them, yes. But long story short, they did end up buying the property, and we only, um, actually, we didn't even lose any money. I think we ended up a couple $1,000 above what we invested with the attorneys and everything out of that 74 acres. And so God blessed us with that. And it still was cheap in the market for the land that prices that were being offered. We were still under market value. And anyway, I ended up doing Bible studies with this man. And after 9 months of Bible studies with him, he was baptized into the church. And he was another man that God had been working with. God had been leading him. He was an honest and true and sincere man. And so these are the stories that I wanted to share. And I know I've used up my time, but I guess in all of these things, we are but children and we don't know how to come in or to go out. And if we continually seek God for the direction in our lives in applying the things that we know to be true and not to compromise, because then we let go of that power. And I think when we get to heaven, if we should be so blessed to be there, we will see how many other experiences that we perhaps have failed at. That if we only would have stood fast in the Word of God, what more God could have done through me and through you. And it seems strange to think that God could use such broken vessels, but it's his purpose, because he wants to encourage us. He wants us to know that he is a living God and that he is active and that he is there for us. And so these things are all for encouragement. I pray that we would be willing to go forward and allow us to be used as God sees best. Now, there were experiences that weren't as good as this either, but those go with those things. But I just wanted to share the good ones because it encourages us to keep moving forward. And so may we all stand fast in the truth, and may the truth work in us by love that purifies the soul. And so I would like to close with a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we want to thank you so much for the experiences of life that you give us. And I want to lift up those that may have listened to this. May they be encouraged and know that we do indeed serve a living God. And may they go forward in faith and knowing that what they are doing could be a blessing to others, that they might be encouraged and know a living God as well, that they could experience the joy and the happiness that comes with these things. And I want to ask your blessings to be upon those who labor for you, like the Light Channel and others, Father, that this word can get out so that you could hasten, Father, your return. We thank you so much for your goodness and this privilege and opportunity to share your goodness with the world around us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.